As Israel rejects ceasefire talks with Hamas, their military focus has shifted from Khan Yunis to the border town of Rafah.
On Wednesday night, Russian troops once again attacked infrastructure in the southern city of Mykolaiv. An industrial complex and a house went up in flames. Several residential buildings and a sports centre were also damaged. Ukraine's air defence forces announced on Telegram that they had shot down 11 Shahed drones overnight in the regions of Mykolaiv, Odessa, Vinnytsia and Novopetrotsk. In Selidov, in the Donetsk region, Russian shelling killed one woman and injured 7 overnight. The attack hit a school and several blocks of flats. In Odessa, several civilian infrastructures were hit, including one school. The attacks came a day after Russian missile strikes across Ukraine killed at least 5 people. The European Parliament has passed a resolution condemning Russia's attempts to interfere in EU decision-making.
Global temperatures breached the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold for the first time over a 12-month period.
With the US Secretary of State's latest diplomatic mission to the Middle East ending in failure, Israel is intensifying its military campaign. Anthony Blinken failed to convince the Israeli government to consider Hamas's ceasefire offer. Instead, Prime Minister Netanyahu says the war will continue until the Palestinian militant group is crushed. On the ground, Israeli forces are now switching their focus from Khan Yunis to Rafah on the border with Egypt. Plans are underway for a ground offensive into the city, where hundreds of thousands of Gazans have fled. Missile strikes on a suburb of Rafah have already killed at least 13 people, including several children. Israel is also seeking to free 130 hostages seized by Hamas during its attacks on Israel on October the 7th. But the death toll is steadily rising. More than 27,000 Palestinians have died so far, while some 1,200 Israelis were killed in Hamas's bloody cross-border autumn raid.
On Wednesday night, Russian troops once again attacked infrastructure in the southern city of Mykolaiv. An industrial complex and a house went up in flames. Several residential buildings and a sports centre were also damaged. Ukraine's air defence forces announced on Telegram that they had shot down 11 Shahed drones overnight in the regions of Mykolaiv, Odessa, Vinnytsia and Novopetrotsk. In Selidov, in the Donetsk region, Russian shelling killed one woman and injured 7 overnight. The attack hit a school and several blocks of flats. In Odessa, several civilian infrastructures were hit, including one school. The attacks came a day after Russian missile strikes across Ukraine killed at least 5 people.
Mirroring protests across Europe, farmers in Italy drove their tractors to the town of Flores in Liguria to protest at the Sanremo Song Festival. Setting off from Lombardy on Wednesday night, they travelled about 240 kilometres to represent Italian farmers in their protest at the televised festival. In Bulgaria, protests and road blockages continued for a third consecutive day across the country. Negotiations between the farmers, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Agriculture on Wednesday lasted nearly 4 hours, but the memorandum proposed by the authorities was not signed. The parties plan on returning to the negotiating table on Friday. And in Spain, farmers in Barcelona continued their protest into the night, and dozens of roads remained closed in various Spanish regions on Thursday. It's the third day of Spanish farmers' protests against European policies for the sector.
The European Parliament has passed a resolution condemning Russia's attempts to interfere in EU decision-making. According to the resolution, approved by 433 with 56 against, Russia is pushing to rebuild its network of allies in Europe, and that is a big danger for democracy.
Russia now is recovering, Kremlin is recovering to reorganize their, how would say, proxies in different areas. Because in the very beginning, since this large-scale war started, we saw that those proxies were silent. Now they're much more brave, again, to speak, to be outspoken.
Russian meddling in EU policy came to light when a Russian newspaper accused the Latvian Russian-speaking MEP, Tatiana Danoka, of being a Russian Secret Service agent. Speaking at the plenary session on Tuesday, she rejected the charges.
They say Tatiana Ždanoka is an agent. Yes, I am an agent. An agent for peace, an agent for Europe without fascism, an agent for minority rights, an agent for United Europe from Lisbon to Ural.
One Romanian MEP proposed further sanctions against any MEP found to be cooperating with Russia.
If someone in the European Parliament is working obviously for and with Putin, that means that they shouldn't get the chance to speak in this House because their voice is the propaganda voice.
Danoka, who had already been banned from standing in the EU elections in June, is now being investigated by the EU Parliament itself.
Russian opposition politician Boris Nesin says he will appeal the Electoral Commission's decision to bar him from running in the upcoming presidential election. The veteran politician says he submitted a lot more than the 100,000 signatures required by the law to be allowed to stand. But the commission says only some 95,000 were valid.
За моей спиной сотни тысяч граждан России, которые поставили за меня подпись. Сотни тысяч. Мы собрали намного больше подписей, чем принесли сюда. За моей спиной стоят 45 200 человек, которые пожертвовали на мой избирательный счет, который вы сегодня хотите закрыть, и зря. Потому что там есть проблема возврата. Понимаете, о чем я говорю, да? 45 200 граждан России пожертвовали на наш избирательный счет 102 миллиона рублей. Такого никогда вообще не было в истории российских выборов.
Long lines of people queuing to sign their support for Nesin, whose campaigning against the war in Ukraine was an indication of a perhaps surprising level of support. Another anti-war candidate, Yekaterina Duntsova, was also rejected on faulty paperwork grounds. Her appeal was dismissed by the Supreme Court, and analysts expect Nesin's will also fail. If it does, President Vladimir Putin will face no serious challenges in his bid to win another 7-year term in office.
The International Criminal Court welcomed Armenia to the Rome Statute at a ceremony in The Hague, the Netherlands. The ICC president said Armenia's ratification of the Rome Statute is a significant decision. It is indeed a brave decision. As part of the Rome Statute, Armenia agrees to exercise criminal jurisdiction over the responsible for crimes on the international community. These include genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Armenia's vote to join the ICC in October further strained the country's ties with its old ally Russia after the court issued an arrest warrant for President Putin over events in Ukraine. Now Putin risks being arrested if he travels to Armenia.
Talks to form a far-right-led government in the Netherlands have come to a premature end for now, leaving the country in limbo as attempts to build a political coalition around anti-Islam lawmaker Geert Wilders stall. Centrist party NSC ended talks last night over what it called, quote, worrisome government finances. Wilders' Party for Freedom, or PVV, swept to victory in the country's November parliamentary election on campaign pledges that included slashing immigration.
A US drone strike in Baghdad has killed the senior commander of a powerful Iranian-backed Iraqi militia. It's the latest retaliatory move by American forces following an attack on a base that killed 3 American soldiers last month. The US military's Central Command said the strike killed a Kataib Hezbollah commander responsible for directly planning attacks on US forces in the region. The move increases concerns that Washington is getting involved in a broader conflict.
The U.S. Supreme Court is scheduled to hear arguments over whether former President Donald Trump is ineligible to be elected again. The event is turning into a spectator sport, with dozens of people queuing up hoping to get a seat inside the courtroom. Trump appealed to the nation's highest court after judges in Colorado ruled he should be disqualified because of his efforts to overturn his loss in the 2020 election, culminating in the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
For the first time, the global temperature pushed past the internationally agreed upon 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold for an entire year. A new climate change report by Copernicus said that January 2024 was the hottest ever January recorded. The findings are based on atmospheric, land and oceanic climate variables data. The report found an average surface air temperature of 13.14 degrees Celsius in January 2024, which was above the average for the month of January from 1991 to 2020, and 0.12 degrees Celsius above the temperature of the previous warmest January in 2020. The globe has broken heat records each month since last June. Climate scientists blame a combination of human-caused warming from the burning of fossil fuels and the El Niño climate pattern.